The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Hello, and welcome back to a new episode of the Personal Safety Show. I am your host, Marcus Melnick, and today we're going to be talking about what everyone is talking about in the firearms community, and that is the assault weapons ban. If you're a firearms enthusiast like I am, you know that the term assault weapon is a made-up term. It is defined by the Army originally as an intermediate caliber, fully automatic machine gun. These are not available to the general public. Only the military and some law enforcement have true assault rifles. However, politics has adopted the term, and anything that is a firearm a lot of times is considered, and making air quotes with my fingers, an assault weapon. So we're going to talk about the new assault weapons bill. However, before we do, I want to point out that there's a lot of people out there on social media who have no idea what they're talking about. They're speaking from emotion. They quote bills that haven't passed. So before we dive into the assault weapons law, I want to explain how to read these types of things when they come out. A bill is an idea that is introduced in either the House of Representatives or the Senate, and specifically we're talking about Illinois. If there is a bill that is introduced in the House, the first two letters of the bill are going to be HB for House Bill. Similarly, something introduced in the Senate is SB and then a number. Usually it's the year of the session followed by the next numerical number available. Once this passes one of the chambers, say the Senate, it goes for a vote in the House. Once it is passed in the House, then it goes to the governor for ratification or veto. If the second chamber starts to make additions, subtractions, that type of thing, it goes back to the first chamber and they need to ratify, they need to look through the changes and vote on it again. This is an arduous process. Once a bill gets signed, it is law. If a bill is introduced, it is not law. It is a bill. Let me explain to you how to read these bills. The assault weapons bill is dozens and dozens of pages, and a lot of it isn't anything new. It is quoting the current laws, but when you print out or look online, the indicator of new language is underlining. So if something is underlined, it was added to the bill. If it is underlined and crossed through, it was taken out of the bill. A lot of times these editing marks stay throughout the law, so when I review it, I can point out what the actual changes to the law are.
It's interesting to note that all firearms pretty much work the same way. A revolver has this revolving cylinder with multiple chambers, and an individual can fire it by just squeezing the trigger. The hammer goes back, that is action number one, and then the hammer drops. Either there is a firing pin attached to the hammer, or the hammer engages a mechanism that engages the firing pin, which strikes the back of the cartridge, igniting the gunpowder, creating rapidly expanding gases, and then the bullet goes. The other way to fire a revolver is to actually, with your thumb, cock back the hammer, and then you're just going to depress the trigger, which is called single action because the hammer is moving in a single action. There are semi-automatics that are double action only, which means each trigger pull moves the hammer backwards and forwards. There are also single action semi-automatics where the hammer is already cocked and you squeezing the trigger only releases the hammer. And then there are the traditional double single action, which means the first trigger pull is long, hard. It's actually a safety feature. The hammer goes back and the hammer drops. And then as the slide operates, it will cock the hammer for subsequent shots in single action. Striker fired is very similar, except there are no external parts. There's no external hammer. When the trigger is squeezed, springs and internal components release a firing pin that strikes the back of a primer, back of a cartridge, and so on and so forth. Revolvers have a slower reload because you have to open up a cylinder and drop in rounds either one at a time. There's a technique for two at a time. And there are devices called speed loaders where you can load 5 at a time, 6 at a time. Each shooter is different, and what they feel comfortable with is all different. A revolver is certainly a viable choice for self-defense, but let's be honest, semi-autos are a lot less expensive to produce because they typically use polymer, although there are some revolvers that use polymer, but most are steel and or stainless steel, meaning production is more expensive, revolvers are more expensive. However, there are some people who just don't like the slide, they don't understand it, they just want to pick it up, squeeze the trigger, and bang. As far as a self-defense incident, the slide mechanism is very, very confusing for them. So they opt for a revolver. It's kind of about style and needs, and it deserves a lot of thought when you are purchasing a gun to figure out what your preference, what your flavor is. The benefits of a semi-auto in a self-defense situation is faster reloading, larger capacity, and compact size. You can conceal semi-autos easily on your person and access them quickly and easily. How long does a gun last? That's a very good question. They last for hundreds of years, generations. If you go and you've seen any of the Pawn Stars type shows, they deal in antique firearms all the time. These are things that are made in the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s, and they still function. The most durable material happens to be stainless steel. Now, stainless steel didn't exist back in the 1600s, 1700s, at least in firearms manufacturing. Here's the big debate. Which brand is best? Well, there's a ton of them that are very, very good. When someone says to me, Marcus, what is your favorite gun? My answer is, you just asked a fat guy if he likes cookies, cakes, ice cream, or donuts. I like them all. Guns are tools. They are used for specific purposes. For example, a Glock 20, which is a very large 10 millimeter handgun, would not be suitable for concealed carry because of its size. Similarly, a Ruger LCP, which is a diminutive, tiny 380, would not be suitable for home defense because you don't have to conceal it. The Ruger is a great concealment gun, whereas the Glock 20 would not be. The first rule of every gunfight is have a gun. Whatever you have should be sufficient. Remember, if you are a concealed carrier, your goal is to escape from danger. Your goal is not to get in an extended firefight. Allow me to explain. Those who engage in extended firefights are members of the military, particularly the last 20 years, Iraq and Afghanistan, although other parts of the world as well, historically. And these soldiers carry rifles because they're a little bit more powerful than a handgun. If a handgun was the only thing that they could carry for an extended firefight, they might be in a little bit of trouble. When you are a concealed carrier, your goal is to escape from the danger. If that means stopping the threat, okay, that means stopping the threat. If that means firing around at the bad guy so you can run away the other way and live and fight another day, is also a great option. We'll get back to the laws right now. So we've had some back and forth with a temporary restraining order, an injunction against the state police for enforcement of this, and then that got overturned. I have recorded and re-recorded this information based upon developments, and now the assault weapons ban stands unless there's another appeal. As far as what it contains, today we are only going to be talking about handguns. Rifles and shotguns will be in a future episode. Prior to the assault weapons ban, effective January 1st, 2024, all firearm transfers had to go through a local federal firearms licensee. They can charge no more than $25. The assault weapons ban bumped that up to July 1st. So as of July 1st of 2023, people will have to go to a local federal firearms licensee to conduct a transfer. The positive is that the record is retained by the federal firearms licensee, number one. Number two, the state does not have access to that information unless they audit the particular FFL. There is no notification to the state on what was transferred. The bad part about it is that it does cost $25, which is hopefully going to be considered an, quote, injury, meaning a legal injury, not a physical injury. which may produce another lawsuit. Illinois law does say that no rule shall allow Illinois State Police to retain records in contravention of state and federal law, which means even now, as you go onto the Illinois State Police portal and type in the person's name, the buyer, the serial number, all that stuff, it is purged from the system, or at least we are told as the public that it is purged from the system every 7 days. So it only retained for 7 days. After that 7-day mark, it is supposed to be gone from the state police system. Do you trust the state? That's for you to answer. After this assault weapons ban came into being, anyone who receives a firearm, stun gun, or taser basically has to provide a transfer notification within 10 days to a federal firearms dealer. That's if someone inherits something or it's a gift within a family. The FFL actually retains that paperwork for 20 years. Previously, as individuals, we only had to preserve the paperwork for 10 years, and it is a paper trail. So if you have a firearm and you sell it or you trade it in and it's traced and it's goes back to you, you have the piece of paper that says, au contraire, I did not commit a crime. I sold it to Joe Stormdoor, or whatever his name is. I just made that up. Hopefully you're laughing. In any event, it is a paper trail. It is to protect the seller. It is also to protect the buyer, because if I'm purchasing a firearm that was previously used in a crime, I will have the receipt that says, oh no, this was done in a crime. This was used in a crime in 2012. I bought it in 2023. Therefore, I'm not liable for any criminal charges. What other changes happened? Upon filing a firearms restraining order, it was originally good for 6 months, with a renewal of up to 6 months. Now the assault weapons ban has increased that to 1 year. If it filed, it is good for 1 year and may be refiled or renewed for up to another year. As far as the assault weapons addresses handguns, the listing that I'm about to give everyone, and I'm reading this and paraphrasing it from the law, it is not a page turner, that is for sure. Here are the things that we cannot do with pistols under this new assault weapons ban. We cannot manufacture, possess, sell, or offer to sell, purchase, manufacture, import, transfer anything that will increase the rate of fire of a semi-automatic firearm above the standard rate of fire that is not equipped with that device, part, or combination of parts. So what is that saying? Well, that's talking about forced reset triggers are banned. That's talking about binary triggers are banned. And it's talking about any trigger job with a lighter trigger pull. And a semi-automatic is banned. Why is this problematic? Well, first of all, they're regulating things that aren't firearms, number one. Number two, Franklin Armory sells firearms completely assembled with binary triggers already in it. Is that a standard rate of fire for that firearm? 2 and 1 trigger pull, or I should say 1 trigger pull and release. That could be interpreted as a standard rate of fire. Again, we've got politicians not knowing about firearms, writing laws about firearms. The law goes on to define what an assault weapon is in regards to handguns. So the following features make a pistol an assault pistol. A semi-automatic pistol with the capacity to accept the magazine, which is almost all of them, or readily modified to accept the magazine, is illegal if the firearm has any one of the following items. A threaded barrel. Threaded barrel looks cool, but the reality is in Illinois, it is for a suppressor, and suppressors are illegal. You cannot have a second pistol grip or another feature capable of functioning as a protruding grip that can be held by the non-trigger hand. The pistol cannot have a shroud attached to the barrel that partially or completely encircles the barrel, allowing the bearer of the firearm to hold with the non-firearm hand. Does not include a slide. Cannot have a flash suppressor, the capacity to accept a detachable magazine at a location outside the pistol grip. So we have pistols that are like a CZ Scorpion, or we'll get into the AR and AK pistols as well, but there are definitely pistols out there that have a magazine receptacle that is not in the grip. Any buffer tube, arm brace or other part that protrudes horizontally behind the pistol grip and is designed to allow someone to shoulder the weapon. Also, a semi-auto pistol that has a fixed magazine with the capacity to accept more than 15 rounds is illegal. Let me clue everyone in on how absolutely ridiculous this is. I did some research and I said, what semi-automatic pistol accepts a clip? And the only one I found, a Finnish broom handle Mauser. That is the type of gun that Han Solo used in Star Wars, because that's pretty common, so you can envision that. But the only time I've ever seen one in use was for the movie The Fifth Element. Early on in the movie, I believe the setting is early 20th century. There are researchers who are at a pyramid, and they're reading the hieroglyphics, and the spaceship comes, and one of the people there got very scared, took this broom handle Mauser, it was a machine gun, and shot at the alien. That was the only one that I could find that fits this description. The following pistols, copies, duplicates, variants, or anything that even remotely resembles what I'm about to say is illegal. All AK-type weapons. Next, all AR-type pistols, calico pistols are illegal. What is a calico pistol? Well, if you've ever watched the movie Spaceballs, the Spaceballs have calico pistols. Any Mac type, those were like 1980s machine guns that you saw in TV shows like the A-Team. Cannot have anything that's a Thompson. And Thompson is a Tommy gun, think Prohibition, think machine gun, that type of thing. As far as magazine capacity for a handgun, it is limited to 15 rounds, 15 rounds. Now, if an individual owns something that is greater than 15 rounds, they are grandfathered in. By the end of the year, they will have to log in to the Illinois State Police website and submit an affidavit saying that they do own these, quote, large capacity feeding devices. It can only be kept in someone's home. It can only be kept at a licensed gun range, which is problematic because gun ranges are not licensed. For gun dealers are licensed, gun ranges are not. In transport to and from, however, the magazine has to be unloaded, or transport to or from a gunsmith, and at the gunsmith it is also perfectly legal, for repair. What this means is if an individual has a concealed carry permit, they cannot carry anything greater than 15 rounds. That's not horrific because most concealed carry firearms have 15 rounds or less, although there are a few out there that hold 17 rounds that are highly concealable. The fact is, the state does not want us to have anything to do with them. So 15 rounds is the capacity. I will also caution people that certain municipalities, immediately following the enactment of the Concealed Carry Act, and also enacted magazine limits. For example, the city of Highland Park, which we talk about a lot because of the recent violence there, the city of Highland Park bans anything greater than 10 rounds. So if you have an 11-round magazine, that doesn't mean 10 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. That means the magazine actually holds 11 rounds. You cannot carry that in Highland Park. The trouble is, most concealed carry semi-automatics have somewhere between 10 and 15 rounds. So if I go into Highland Park, I have to switch out magazines so I have a 10-rounder instead of a 12-rounder. A little bit ridiculous. So I carry an extra magazine, and now I have 20 shots instead of 10. That's what we have to do in order to obey the law. I've ever seen one in use was for the movie The Fifth Element. Early on in the movie, I believe the setting is early 20th century. There are researchers who are at a pyramid, and they're reading the hieroglyphics, and the spaceship comes, and one of the people there got very scared, took this broom handle Mauser, it was a machine gun, and shot at the alien. That was the only one that I could find that fits this description. The following pistols, copies, duplicates, variants, or anything that even remotely resembles what I'm about to say is illegal. All AK-type weapons. Next, all AR-type pistols, calico pistols are illegal. What is a calico pistol? Well, if you've ever watched the movie Spaceballs, the Spaceballs have calico pistols. Any Mac type, those were like 1980s machine guns that you saw in TV shows like the A-Team. Cannot have anything that's a Thompson. And Thompson is a Tommy gun. Think Prohibition, think machine gun, that type of thing. As far as magazine capacity for a handgun, it is limited to 15 rounds, 15 rounds. Now, if an individual owns something that is greater than 15 rounds, they are grandfathered in. By the end of the year, they will have to log in to the Illinois State Police website and submit an affidavit saying that they do own these, quote, large capacity feeding devices. It can only be kept in someone's home. It can only be kept at a licensed gun range, which is problematic because gun ranges are not licensed. For gun dealers are licensed, gun ranges are not. In transport to and from, however, the magazine has to be unloaded, or transport to or from a gunsmith, and at the gunsmith it is also perfectly legal for repair. What this means is if an individual has a concealed carry permit, they cannot carry anything greater than 15 rounds. That's not horrific because most concealed carry firearms have 15 rounds or less, although there are a few out there that hold 17 rounds that are highly concealable. The fact is, the state does not want us to have anything to do with them. So 15 rounds is the capacity. I will also caution people that certain municipalities, immediately following the enactment of the Concealed Carry Act, and also enacted magazine limits. For example, the city of Highland Park, which we talk about a lot because of the recent violence there, the city of Highland Park bans anything greater than 10 rounds. So if you have an 11-round magazine, that doesn't mean 10 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. That means the magazine actually holds 11 rounds. You cannot carry that in Highland Park. The trouble is, most concealed carry semi-automatics have somewhere between 10 and 15 rounds. So if I go into Highland Park, I have to switch out magazines, so I have a 10-rounder instead of a 12-rounder. A little bit ridiculous. So I carry an extra magazine, and now I have 20 shots instead of 10. That's what we have to do in order to obey the law. There is a
great YouTube page to subscribe to would be Freedoms, plural, Steel, Steel. That channel is maintained by Todd Vandermite, and Todd used to be the NRA contract lobbyist for the state of Illinois. He's very, very knowledgeable, and he has a very good handle on what we can do and what we can't do, what the law says, what it doesn't say. I get a lot of my information from him because I know it's accurate. If you go out there, there's a lot of people online, I've said this earlier, who have their own opinions, and in their world, they're right. However, they might not be right in the eyes of the law. Be very careful on what you read. Look at it with a grain of salt. Everything that I said today and in all my shows, I would urge you to verify it. And if I am wrong, please reach out to me and say, Marcus, you are wrong. But don't just say, Marcus, you are wrong. Say, Marcus, you are wrong because ABC, back it up, do your research, don't act on an emotional level. All right, I want to tell you a little story about me that happened a couple days before taping. It was a Sunday morning. I qualify all of my concealed carry students on Sunday morning before we hit the legal part of the class. Day one, I focus on how to shoot, what to do, aiming, stance, etc. And then first thing in the morning, day two, we head to the range. I'm going south on 53, just north of Schaumburg, and there's no one on the road. It's a Sunday morning. It's 7:30 in the morning, except for one car in front of me. And I wasn't on him. I was a safe distance back. And when I drive, I look through the cars in front of me, rear window and front window, to see ahead of that car to see if there's any hazards in the road that I have to avoid. So I was looking ahead of the car in front of me, and all of a sudden this guy slams on his brakes for no reason. There was nothing in front of him. There was no animal. There was no other cars. There wasn't a person running across. I beeped. I reacted. I went beep. I didn't do beep. It wasn't an angry toot. It was just a, holy cow, you have stopped suddenly and I don't want to hit you. So I'm going to warn you. Well, immediately, one of his fingers went up. I will let you guys guess which one, but I wanted to say to him, if you want to wave to me, why don't you use all your fingers? No, I really wasn't going to say that. It was a joke. He's ranting and raving and very animated, and his finger is up. He's in the car in front of me, and I'm going to the range. I am loaded for bear. If it were a Red Dawn moment, I would have survived. So there was a plethora of weaponry and ammunition with me because my students get to try out different guns when we go to the range, depending on what I bring with, and usually it's what's in common use. So I didn't react to him, and he very suddenly went into, I was in the middle lane, he very suddenly went to the right lane, like a sudden movement, rolled down his window, so when I passed him, he's screaming his head off at me. That's a less than intelligent person. That's an emotionally unstable person. Nobody can hear you, even if you're standing on the road and there's cars going by at 55 miles an hour. When I worked for a police department, we actually responded to the Edens Expressway. I was an intern at the time for the Skokie Police Department, and someone was giving birth in the car on the Edens Expressway. The cop I was with and I went and we responded, and I'm in observation mode, but if someone needs me to carry something to the ambulance from the ambulance, basically I can do labor. I can help people, that type of thing. I can't treat people, at least not at the time, because I was early 20s. I got out of the car on the highway, and it was loud, and I mean loud. We had to yell to hear each other. So this guy yelling at me as I'm driving by was not too bright. If that tells you anything about the emotional stability of this individual, screaming and yelling at someone, he has no idea who I am. He has no idea what I have in my car. He has no idea my experience. And unfortunately, we deal with these types of people in public a lot. There are people that are very, very stressed, and they might be good people, but they might be having a bad day. They might react negatively in the grocery store. As long as you're not in any danger, that's fine. So here I am. I'm a firearms instructor. I'm involved in a road rage incident. You know what I did? Nothing. I didn't react. I was not in immediate danger. There was no need for me to deploy or use my firearm. I ignored the guy. And then he followed me for a little bit. I don't mean he followed me. We were traveling in the same direction on the highway. And then he got off. End of story. Nobody got hurt. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.